Welcome back to another episode of 8 Rice Up. I'm your host, Ryan Rice, and this is my beautiful wife, Maida.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode.
Yeah,
We're very excited.
this one's going to be really good. I'm
Yes.
excited about this. We have a special guest. Her name is Emily McVey. Very fun. With her, she has an interesting story. She grew up in an adopted family. Her mom passed away at 19. Her brother passed away, and then eventually one of her friends passed away. And it just seems like grief has been sprinkled throughout her life. And so I want to dive into it. Emily, how's it going?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing really well. Doing
Good.
well.
Welcome to our podcast. We're
Thank
really
you.
excited to have you.
Yeah. So I want to dive into the first one with your mom. I know you were 19 when your mom passed away. At that age, I know you still had your grandparents. Like nobody around you really had died or passed away or anything. How was that? I mean, what was that like for you? Because right when you're 19, you're like, oh my gosh, like this isn't really happening. Like you understand it, but like not really.
Yeah. So not only was I 19, but it was only 2 months from when she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer to when she passed away. So it was very like short
Mhm.
to comprehend the diagnosis, and she was in the hospital majority of the time. So processing that piece of it, and then yes, I was 19. I was still in college. I was, navigating a job as well as going to the hospital to see her every
Wow.
week, and then also on top of that, going to school. So it was a lot of pressure, and but I knew I needed to be there. Like that wasn't ever, anything that I questioned. I knew that as soon as I was done with school that week, I was going to see my mom in the hospital. It was about I want to say like an hour and a half, 2 hours to the hospital to see her. I would stay with her a night, and then I would go work, and then I would go back to school. So I didn't really have time to, process it when we were there, for the 2 months. So um, yeah, she was diagnosed with cancer, ovarian cancer, in September of
Mhm.
2011, and it was very sudden. I mean, we had no idea what was going on with her. At first, it was like she was constipated. That's what they said. Then we ended up at the cancer unit. And from there, um, she also was on blood thinners. So it kind of went in between, she was on thinners, and then they had to thicken her blood for the surgery. And so it was kind of just like back and forth with trying to get a surgery date. And then after that, a blood clot traveled to her lung. And a part of me thinks that she, passed away from the blood clot in her lung rather than the cancer. But I'm not sure. So
But it just kind of it just hits you. Like, what was she just not feeling well? You took her to the doctor, and they're like, "Oh, by the way, you have cancer."
her stomach was so bloated. I don't know if you know much about ovarian cancer, but her stomach was just like, I mean, like she was pregnant. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, she had a lot of fluid in her stomach. They ended up having to do drainage of the fluid. And I mean, they were constantly draining out the fluid from her stomach. So that was our first sign. And then they were like, you're not constipated, something more is going on. And then we went to one of the bigger hospitals, and that's when we found out that she had cancer. It was actually on my dad's birthday,
Wow. Oh my gosh.
2011. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's definitely a lot to take. It reminded me of my late husband, right? Because he ended up having a clot in his lungs, and that clot traveled to his heart.
Mhm.
And when they did surgery, that's when he ended up passing away.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm sure it's. I mean, what do you do when you find out first that she has cancer, and then she's going through all of that, and they say about the clot, and then I mean, the last I bet the last thing you expected is that she was gonna pass away.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, you said it at the beginning, like, you're 19, you don't really think that your mom can pass away. That was my exact thoughts. My exact thoughts. There's no way she's, early 50s. There's no way I can lose my mom. Like I thought of like losing parents, when they're older, or, oh, she'll be okay. And the doctor kept kind of confirming she would be okay. And her body too, she was fine some days. She actually came home one time. She came home one time in between that 2 months, and her stitches ended up like separating or something, and she was losing a lot of blood, so she had to go back to the hospital, and then she never came back home after that.
Oh my
So
Wow.
gosh.
yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. And I know, I think the last conversation you had with her, you didn't realize that was going to be it. I mean,
Right.
what happened in that conversation? Like, what did you say?
Yeah, so I call it a God moment.
Uh-huh.
And that was like, you know, I want to say my first like God moment that I like had realized. So I was out in the lobby. She was in the ICU, so I was in the lobby. A couple of my friends were there staying with me. Still didn't think she was going to pass away. Like her breathing had slowed down. But she was still like talking. She was still okay. Anyways, I was asleep in the lobby, and it was like 3 a.m. and my body just woke up. And I'm like, again, now I'm like, that's a God moment. But I ended up going to her room. I'm like, absolutely, I'm going into her room. Nobody was in there. So it was just me and her. And I ended up, holding her hand, talking to her, and just saying, I love you. And she told me that she loved me back. And then after that, her breathing slowed down where she wasn't able to talk at all. I mean, she was there, but she couldn't talk. Her breathing, was slowing down. She had no voice. Every time it was interesting. Every time my dad would touch her hand, her heart rate would go up every single time. Every single time. I mean, it was down, and then he would, rub her hand, and then it would go up. So it was just interesting. They say hearing is the last thing that goes. So I think that she, definitely heard conversations and stuff. So, but that
Oh,
was our last moment. And then she passed away at like 5:02 a.m.
Oh, that's crazy. That would be super hard. But when she finally did pass away, um, what was your thought? I'm sure it was like denial, like no way, like how could this possibly happen?
I felt like I was in a movie.
Yeah.
I left screaming, like
Mhm.
I was bloody murder screaming. I could not believe that it had happened. Um, I just was in shock. I was in shock. And I had my dad was like, I think he was trying to be strong. Of course, he was, crying and stuff, but he was like, this is God's timing, and we're gonna go from here. And so I just felt so alone, though. I felt so alone. At the beginning, I had friends there, but it was like they didn't understand. They still had, their mom, and yeah, so navigating, the beginning was really difficult. But it was just
Right.
like get through the funeral, get through the visitation, and then we'll, move forward from that.
Yep. And that's how it is, right? You take one step at a time, and you're like,
Yes.
people are like, what are you gonna do next month? You're like, I have no idea. I have no
I had
idea
no
what I'm
idea.
doing in an hour. I have no idea.
Yes.
Yep. No, it's oh.
so how did the funeral plans go? Did you have to plan it? Your dad? Did you have help?
Yeah, so my dad did most of it. I mean, I was there right beside him. We did, the obituary together. We did a lot of stuff together. My dad and I have kind of a unique relationship. We weren't as close as my mom and I. Being in high school, you're closer to your mom typically. And we were so much, I would say, so much alike that we just, we I don't know. Anyways, we grew our relationship after my mom passed away, and so we did a lot of stuff together for the funeral things. And so the visitation, for us, we did like 2 hours for visitation, which is so long. 2 hours is a long time just standing up there, people coming and hugging you. And honestly, I did not even want to be there. I mean,
Right.
someone hugging me, and I'm like, oh, just let go, and they just want to keep on hugging you. And at that point, you're so tired, you have no like emotions left, like you're just so exhausted. And then, people saying, you know, I lost my mom a couple years ago, and just kind of comparing. And that was really difficult for me too. That comparison of like, oh, I lost my mom, but the person's maybe 60 years old and I'm 19, you know, that it's different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and every death is different, you know, whether, you know, it is your mom, we have something in common. We both lost our mom, but it's at different ages. You had a different relationship, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Yeah. So here you are 19, you lose your mom, you're struggling to cope with it. And
right.
then a few years later, what happens?
Yeah. So suppressed for 10 years. I mean, I just honestly didn't really like, obviously thought about her. I felt like I needed to be sad on, you know, her anniversaries. I felt like, you know, I needed to write a post on Facebook about her, you know, all those things. And so I continued to go to college. I actually got my bachelor's degree, continued, you know, through college, and continued to suppress. And then in 2014, I graduated college with my bachelor's degree, and I moved back home with my dad. That was the hardest 3 years. That was really hard. I had to go back to the same home. I was able
Mm-hmm.
to remove myself. I didn't have to deal with it. I wasn't there. I wasn't in the hometown. I'm from a very small town. I mean, 1,500 people. I mean, very small. And so there's only like a couple gas stations, a Dollar General, you know, small things. And she would go to those places. And every time I would go to
Mm-hmm.
those places, I was reminded of her. And not that I didn't want to be reminded of her, I just hadn't dealt with all the emotions leading up to that. And so I was, you know, still suppressing. And so I would do anything, anything to get out of the house, go work out, go hang out with my friends. I mean, anything rather than sit there at the house, you know, and just my dad had started to remove some of her things. And I think that was maybe a little difficult for me as well, to see that the house that I grew up in was changing to be more like a man cave.
Mm.
So, yeah,
That would be hard.
yeah.
That would be hard. So your mom dies, you continue going to college.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't stay there and then you come back 3 years later. So you had to go through that tunnel of coming back to the same house,
Right.
but nothing is the same.
No,
Nothing is the same.
and repressing. And it's great that you know you're like, I can't be here, so you go out, you work out, you do things. You know, it's distraction. I think we all play that
Right.
game, right? You're like, I'm
Yes.
going to distract
Yes.
myself. I'm not going to think about it. You love
Right.
them, you miss them, but it's like I can't deal with this,
Right.
right?
Right. Yes.
And I would love to get your perspective on eventually you became a mother,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
that's got to hit you and be like, oh my gosh, like what if I
Yeah.
died? Like, how would my kids take
Right.
it? You know?
Yeah. So after, so I in 2017 I moved to Kansas with my boyfriend, and I had a job, whatever. Anyways, and then in 2018, that's when I got a call about my brother passing.
Mhm.
Um, and he was adopted as well from a different family, but we have always been siblings since we were very young. And so then he had special needs, and he was going to live in a group home. So my dad was his payee, and then also my aunt had just become his guardian. So um, he had lived there for literally a week, and we had got the call that he collapsed while taking his medications in the kitchen. And that was hard for me to really understand. And I still hold some guilt about that. And I know that it's not anything to do with me. I have no control over it. I just still hold a little bit of guilt, and I know that that's normal, and I'm still working through that. He had messaged me the night before, said that he's not feeling well. I was like, did you go to the doctor? You know, and I was his advocate. He was like, yeah, I went to the doctor, went to the emergency room. They said it's just a virus. I'm like, okay, well, then maybe it's just a virus. You know, he was overweight, And but I also didn't think at 28 years old that you could have a heart attack. Again, like I'm just like blindsided by these things, but then I know other people that it has happened to, but I'm still like not this young, right? We didn't find out that he had a heart attack until a year later. It took a long time for the autopsy
Wow.
results to come back. It just kept coming back with other things. And, but later we found out that he had an enlarged heart.
Wow.
So that was difficult. You know, he told me that he wasn't feeling well. And then he also called me at 2 a.m. that morning. Before he passed away, and I was asleep. I didn't answer it. And so that's where I'm like, maybe I could have done something, you know? And I
Mm-hmm.
know that again, you know, God is in control, and I couldn't have traveled, you know, 5, 6 hours, you know, to help his heart. So, um, but we still, you know, have guilt that we have to work through.
Yeah. So how many years later was that after your mom? I guess.
After my mom, so my mom passed away in 2011, and then my brother passed away in 2018.
Okay.
And then I had a
Wow.
couple grandmas actually pass away in between then too, in between my mom and my brother.
Wow. So what did you do to not be angry at God?
Oh, I
Be-
was angry for 10 years. 10
Were
years.
you?
I mean, I was so angry. You know, I had always went to church as a child. My parents, you know, we were going every Sunday to Sunday school, then church, then youth group, then Sundays, or then church again, and then we went on Wednesdays. And I you know, I was young, so I wasn't probably paying attention like I should have, but I was angry. I was angry at God, but that foundation has always, you know, kept. I have always had the
Mm-hmm.
foundation of God, and I've always come back to him. It wasn't until I honestly had my daughter and I started going back to church. And I had my daughter in 2019, and I started going when I was pregnant with her. And there was one sermon, and um, he was talking about anger, and God can take our anger. He can take our anger. Um, but I shouldn't have been mad at God, you know, all the blessings that he had, you know, had given me, but I couldn't see them because I was so angry.
Right. Right. 100%. I mean, and with your story, I just love how strong you are and the sweet spirit that you carry with you because I can feel how much you love God and how much you care about having a relationship with him. Um, but you were also adopted, right? You were
Right.
adopted very, very little. You lose your
Mm-hmm.
mom, you lose your grandmas, in between, you lose your brother. I mean, how not to feel alone with that story,
Right.
right?
But I think what you're doing is beautiful. You're reaching out to other people that definitely feel alone because you've been there, you've done that. You're
Right.
like, I don't want anybody else to have to go through that, not knowing that, hey, somebody's out there for you.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my exact mission, is just to let people know that they're not alone in, you know, grief is lonely. But if you can find someone that you can connect to, you can find someone's, you know, at that time when I was 19, I wasn't really on Instagram. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really, honestly, I don't know that I was really seeking out for help. I was just lonely, had nowhere to go, you know, I was just stuck. And so I want other people to know that they have people that are in their corner, that have lived experience. I mean, you don't have to be a certified grief coach, certified counselor, you know, any of that to know the experience and to have gone through it, and, you know, to help people, and honestly just listen. Isn't that what we all
Mm-hmm.
want, is someone to just listen? Sometimes it's not about providing support, or sorry, providing, you know, communication back. We just want someone to be there.
Right. Right. How did you do that? To be able to welcome people into your life and look for them and communicate with others. Because at least for me, I didn't want to talk to anybody. Right. And with you, but I had just lost one person in my whole entire life.
Mhm.
Until just recently, I lost an aunt that's kind of close to me, right? But you lost so many people in a short period of time. How did you do that? How were you okay reaching out or like being okay to, I don't know, continue with life and being able to talk to others? Um, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I think I had suppressed it for so long and I hadn't talked about it. And I think one reason why I had suppressed it and why I hadn't talked about it, I don't think people talked to me about it. No one really asked me, how are you doing? Like the funeral's over, right? Everybody goes back to their normal life. And we are still living the experience and we will forever live it, And so I think I had suppressed it for so long that I just was like, I can't hold it in any longer. Like I have to talk about it. And then I came to the point where honestly, I wouldn't say I didn't feel comfortable with it. I just came to the realization, regardless if you talk to me about it or not, I'm still going to cry. So it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter, and then it's not about other people's comfortability. It's about you getting it out and you, on your healing journey. And that's how we heal. That's how we heal is talking about our loved ones. That's how I heal, anyways. I want to talk about them. I want to be asked about them. I want to share stories about them. And I really started to realize that when I had my daughter, when she first started really to like acknowledge pictures and things, and she could say grandma. And there were several times where we'd be in the grocery store and she would just say, well, my grandma used to say that, or my grandma used to like that. And I'm like, how did you know that? Because you
Mm.
never met her, And so those types of things, and there's some stuff that's, totally off, but there are some things where she says, and I'm like, I've never told her that before. And so that just brought me life. And that brought me, that realization of, I want to talk about her. I want my daughter to know about how amazing she was. And my brother. So that's kind of where I just was like, you know what? Other people need to hear about it. Other people need to find comfort in my story, their story, and how unique everybody's journey is. And maybe it'll give someone, the power to talk about their story.
That's beautiful. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And having been through everything that you've been through, losing so many people that are so important in your life, what do you strive to do different now as a mother? Is there something that you are like, okay, this is what, since you know that life is short and you had to learn that as such a young age?
Yeah. So I think it really began with my birth was very traumatic with my daughter. After I had her, the doctor said, you know, she had told my boyfriend that you could have lost both of them. And that's when I was like, excuse me, like I could have died. And I was like, just like the realization of that. And so how I kind of have moved, forward with that, it was very traumatic, but we're here, we're alive, and you can only take minute by minute. And I take a lot of pictures. Back then in 2019, even when I was younger, we didn't have like phones, flip phones, picture phones. We had track phones. And so I don't have like a lot of pictures, with my mom, high school till college. And so I take a lot of pictures, of my daughter, of my family, and it's probably annoying, but guess what? They're gonna, thank me someday. So that they have pictures. And I would also say, I'm very present with my daughter. And I speak a lot about my mom. I speak a lot about my brother, and just want her to know about about them.
That's awesome.
I think that's beautiful. And really, I like what you said, where really, I think most people that are grieving or dealing with a lot of issues, they're not
Mhm.
looking for somebody to talk back, right? They're
Right.
looking to somebody to talk at, not talk with,
Right.
right? You
Yes.
just, and that's the biggest thing, the biggest advice we tell people is just
Mhm.
show up for people that are grieving. Just be
Hmm.
there,
Yes.
just be a listening ear. and just let them talk, because like what you're doing now, you've gone through years of suppression and just not dealing with it till you're going to explode. And now you're like, well, I need to let this out. And you're doing it in a beautiful way that's helping other people, but it's letting you feel those emotions, go through that tunnel. And
Right.
I mean, that's the only way to get through it and become whole again.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
So that's awesome. I know you have some resources on your Instagram and things that, if people want additional resources or additional help, they can look at. Why don't you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, so after losing my best friend in 2023, that's when I really created my ebook. She was like, "You should do it. You need to do it." And so then, you know, after she passed, I was like, I need to do it. And so I have an ebook that is for mothers who are navigating loss. So any loss. So whether it be grandparents, friends, brothers, anybody. And it has tools in there, resources, self-care tips. It's 40 some pages long. It has a lot of information in it. And, just really talks about how to take care of ourselves while also taking care of our kids. And sometimes it's literally just surviving, getting our kids food. And sometimes we don't have anything more to give. And that's okay. That's what we have at that moment. And so that's one of the resources that I have. And then I also created a journal. So it just gives you some journal prompts to kind of get you thinking. And I really wish that I would have had that back then to kind of, just rethink about those things. I think also when you have a traumatic death, you experience watching someone pass away like I did, that's all that you have in your vision, and you have to retrain your brain to find the positive. And that has also been, a long time coming. And I really wish that I would have had, a journal or the resources or someone that I could connect with through that. And then I just have a free self-care worksheet, kind of get you thinking about, our self-care activities change. What you did 10 years ago may not be what you do now because you're a mother, or you're just not interested in those things anymore. So just identifying what your self-care activities are and how can we reincorporate those in your life. As a mom, again, finding time for yourself is really hard, and sometimes it's self-care is just taking a shower, you
Mm-hmm.
know by yourself.
100%.
Awesome.
So
That's so
yeah.
true. That's so
Yeah.
true. Oh my gosh, do I know that? I was gonna ask you, what is the best advice that you can give somebody that is going through grief and that is new to this, that have lost a mom, a brother, a spouse, that you could give them?
Yeah, my advice would be to allow yourself the space to grieve. um if I would have known that back then, and I wouldn't have felt like I had to be so strong for everybody else, or that I was making other people uncomfortable, or that I was stepping around other people's feelings, I think that I would have been on my journey sooner to healing. And um, I think, obviously it happened, God put this in my space for a reason. And I would just say, don't suppress someone, find someone that you can connect with and talk all about them and all about your grief.
That's beautiful. Yeah, 100%. You got to feel it, allow yourself to feel it, give yourself that space and permission to
And
say it's
permission.
okay to be not okay.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Awesome. Um,
Yeah, actually that book helped me. I don't know if you've read it, but It's Okay Not to Be Okay. That book really helped me, and I read that a couple years ago, and it was like, okay, I don't have to be okay. And just giving
Mm-hmm.
yourself that
yeah,
permission is so important. But it took me, so long to get to that point.
yeah. Awesome. Well, Emily, where can people find you on social media? What's your Instagram handle? Things
Yeah,
like
my
that.
Instagram is Grieving with Emily. And then I'm also on TikTok, and that's also Grieving with Emily.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, Emily, we've absolutely loved having you on here. I'm hoping a lot of our viewers go on and check out your resources. I think that's extremely valuable. But I just want to say thank you again for coming on here and sharing your story. I think it's absolutely been beautiful.
Yeah, no, and I think there's definitely a lot to talk about. I would love for you to come back, and we can dive into a certain topic and talk more about it. But thank you so much for joining us, and giving your perspective on life now and the
Yeah.
person that you have become. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I truly appreciate that. And hopefully someone can start their healing journey today.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, that's our episode for 8 Rice Up. We will catch you guys on the next one.